Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. Today is episode number 149. I'm your host, Phil Huber, joined by Logan Whitmer and special guest Kevin Scott. We'll let Kevin introduce himself in just a little bit. Want to give a shout out today for the episode sponsor. This episode is presented by Epilogue Laser. You can quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloguelaser.com. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Now, you're joining us. Logan and I are in the bleak throes of early spring in the Midwest, and you're not. You're out in California, aren't you?
Yeah, although it's been an unusual winter here in California. So I live in Silicon Valley in the Bay Area, and it is also gray, bleak, cold, and rainy here as well, which is very unusual for us.
Yeah, waiting for your next atmospheric river to come through.
Yeah, I would be super happy never to hear the words atmospheric river or bomb cyclone ever again.
So Kevin, what do you do in your day job? I mean, we know, but nobody else does.
Yeah, so I'm the chief technology officer at Microsoft, and I'm a computer scientist by training and have worked in the technology industry for many years now. But I grew up in a family of woodworkers and actual carpenters in rural central Virginia. So my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my father were all in the construction business, and so that was their day job. And in their off hours, they also did woodworking. They made furniture, they restored antiques. My maternal grandfather did as well. So I was just surrounded my entire childhood by makers, and the only appropriate spare time activity that one could do was go in the shop and make some sawdust.
That's awesome.
Did you get roped into any of the work that they were doing as a kid that was part of your just growing up?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that they did for me, which in retrospect was pretty incredible, was that I got drawn into woodworking really early. One of my favorite Christmas presents I ever got all time was, I think when I was 8 years old, my granddad made me a carpenter's toolbox and filled it up with a little handsaw, a little bit and brace, one of the wooden folding rules, and a hammer, and so I had my own stuff, and they were unafraid to let me use tools pretty early on, and I was always in the shop with them. And when I got to be a teenager, I was a kid in the 70s and the 80s, and so there was a big car stereo craze in the 1980s, and so I would do stuff as a teenager building speaker boxes for speakers that went into my car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So your shop at your place, do you have a shop at home, or we know that Microsoft probably has a community shop that everybody gets to use on their break times.
Yeah, we actually have many community shops. So one of the things, one of the programs that I run at Microsoft is this thing called the Garage, and so in tons of our buildings, we have big shops, so with woodworking equipment and machine tools and electronics labs. And so where I'm at right now is I'm lucky enough to have a big commercial space that my shop is in. So, and it's a weird space. So downstairs is machine shop, wood shop. I've got industrial sewing machines. So sort of anything you can imagine for making all sorts of stuff. And then upstairs is commercial office space, which is where my offices are, and our family foundation gets run out of this building as well. So cool. my wife is actually, who runs our family foundation, shares this building where her meetings get interrupted because the dust collector gets turned on.
It's like when we're trying to film some of our CNC stuff in our shop. And the air compressor turns on. It's like, oh god! All right, wait a couple minutes for the air compressor to shut off.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I had to do before getting on this podcast is to turn the air compressor off so that it doesn't cycle on while we're talking.
Oh, that's awesome.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So how did you get into, for example, I mean, like I grew up, my dad was a woodworker, and I did woodworking as a kid, and then you get that weird like college stretch where you're not really woodworking in college. And then how did you pick it back up as an adult where it was your space now?
Yeah, it took a really long time, actually. So for a while I was in college, I went to school close enough to home so that I could borrow my dad's shop whenever I needed to do a project. But, honestly, I didn't have a ton of time to do woodworking. Like, I was trying to get a PhD in computer science and, was working 3 jobs to put myself through school. And then that I had like a really weird career. Like my wife is a history. We met when she was a history PhD student, and we moved to Germany together to like where I was a computer science professor at the University of Göttingen, and she was trying to finish her PhD up. And then we moved to Manhattan, where I was an employee at Google before Google's IPO, and then like I had no space for a shop, and this was like before the days of maker spaces where you could go rent some space. So like just zero woodworking in New York City, and then we moved to California 16 or 17 years ago now. And one of the very first things that I did in a rental house is it had a detached 1-car garage, and I learned how to build a wood shop in a very small space. So, and in some ways, like I actually missed that. Like the whole process of figuring out how to understand what it is that you want to make, and then putting like just exactly the bare minimum tools that you need to go make those things, and just super efficiently use space. Like that was a fun project in and of itself.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. So when you were in your one stall shop, what were your projects? What did they look like? I mean, what type of projects did you build there?
Yeah, so I set the shop up to make furniture. So like that was my aspiration. And so I think like a whole bunch of folks in our generation, like in addition to having my parents, I grew up watching Norm Abrams and the New Yankee Workshop. I grew up watching. I was a full adult by the time this came around because I'm an old man. But like David Mark's show. So I watched whatever was available on PBS, which was like the best resource in the world for someone living in the country in Virginia. And I always aspired to make the sorts of things that I saw Norm and David making on their TV shows. I was like, one day I'll have. The wrong thing that I thought is like, oh, the thing that will let me do this are tools, and I like very much underappreciated like that it was mostly about skill, and like tools are facilitators for skill, and sometimes they help you save time, and sometimes they help you waste time.
That's funny.
Well, and especially when you see somebody that's a professional like Norm Abrams and David Marks, where they're fully equipped, and it's taken them a while to get to that point. So you're just kind of dazzled as a beginner by all the accessories in the background, and you really forget to see what's going on in the fact of that skillful use of tools. Yeah,
and it's just very basic stuff that I think was non-obvious to me when I first started doing this stuff, that wood is an organic material and that it moves on you.
Oh yeah.
You cut it and stresses get relieved and things buckle and bow and it's just knowing your material and knowing how to handle it and like what it's going to do under a whole bunch of conditions. Like it has nothing to do with the tools. And you can have the best tools in the world and not understand that stuff and end up having horrible outcomes in your projects.
Yeah. Well, and it's like we were talking about before we started recording is, sometimes having all the tools in the world doesn't help you if you don't understand how to use them. We're talking about turning, you sometimes see people on YouTube showing a incorrect procedure with the wrong tool. And it's like, well, there's a lot more to it than that. Some of the best craftsmen that I've ever met work out of their garage with a table saw and a joiner and planer, and that's it.
Yeah.
So...
And like, look, these tools are also dangerous. I used to think it was kind of silly that, every episode of the New Yankee Workshop and, Norm was saying, I forget exactly what, but there's no more important tool than these, your safety glasses. And,
Yep.
And the first time you get a splinter in your eye or you're working an angle grinder and like get a piece of, you'll understand.
Yep.
And so it's better to just follow those precautions. Like we've had it here in my shop, like just over the past 2 years, like 2 triggers of like the saw stop safety mechanism that if it hadn't been there, like it would have meant a pretty serious injury. Like I've in the past 5 years had a router table injury, and I've been woodworking for 30 years, and so. You just never can assume that you fully mastered all of your tools, and you have to exercise a great degree of caution, I think.
Yeah.
So what are the kinds of projects that you work on now?
So I do all sorts of stuff, and the things that I get really excited about now are things where you're sort of mixing a bunch of tools and techniques and materials that don't usually go together. So I still do a bunch of furniture stuff. Like I just recently I'm lucky enough to have a really super talented shop manager who works here with me. And we made a Krenov inspired display cabinet like out of this like beautiful straight grained ash, where
cool.
It was sort of a mixture of classic techniques, and then we sort of turned all of the or like CNC'd all of the door frames with these beautifully like filigreed mullions, and then one of our favorite things to do, because we have a machine shop here, is to like make your own hardware. So like all of the pulls we had little brass standoffs that connected the case and the stand together that were custom machined. And like that's a really fun thing to do. And I know that I'm not the only person in the world who's doing machining and woodworking at the same time, but I think it's something that is actually way, way, way more accessible now than it was 30 years ago, just because, like you can buy yourself a pretty inexpensive benchtop metal lathe for not much more than what a wood turning lathe costs. And like this whole new world has opened up. Like you can make your own pulls. You can sort of, make your own hinges, whatever it is that you can imagine. You can like I made a barrister's bookcase where like
pictures.
So we even machined the slides for the doors for the barrister's bookcase. So the leveling feet for it, custom machine, the pulls, the slides. And we do a bunch of stuff where like I love walnut. So like a lot of our projects are walnut and brass. Like we'll do brass inlays into walnut. Ton of stuff. And then, like that barrister's bookcase had leather in it as well. So like we put leather inlays on the top. And so it's like a very, sort of old school thing built with a bunch of new world technique.
That's awesome. So would you say you have a particular furniture style that you enjoy more than others? Like, I'm a huge shaker fan. I love shaker stuff.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular style?
I don't know that I do. Like, I really like modern, clean lines, sort of spare and sparse things. I love shaker furniture as well. Like, I built a bunch of shaker projects. I tend not to love the more ornate projects. Like, I don't own any, sort of Chippendale style stuff. Like, I've never carved a, ball and claw foot before, and have never felt like, I've watched videos, like, I can sort of watch it and admire the enormous amount of skill that goes into it, but, like, that's never been a thing that I've, like, I would love to go do that myself.
See, and I think that's probably why I enjoy shakers so much, is because a very clean shaker design can be very modern. I love Thomas Mosier type furniture. Same thing. My wife would not allow a Chippendale piece in our house.
Right.
So I would love to build one. Man, if I could get somebody to buy one from me, that'd be great. I mean, I don't really want to do commissions ever again, but, like, that would be fun. But it's just not my style for the house, so.
Yeah. I totally agree. But, like, just being part of the fun... Part of the fun of making for me is, like, part of it is just this meditative process. So, like, in my day job, like, almost nothing that I do is about, like, what I can make with my own two hands individually, where I can work on it for, a small handful of hours and then see a thing that I've made. So, like, almost everything that I do is, like, tens, hundreds, thousands of people working together on a thing for years before you get the thing that you can go ship to a bunch of people. So it like, being able to do this stuff is very fulfilling. Like, it lets me have a creative outlet that I wouldn't otherwise have. And it's also, like, very meditative, I find. So like, you're operating a dangerous piece of equipment, and you're trying to do something that requires a lot of precision on an expensive piece of material, like, you tend to just think about that. Like, you are very in the moment. Like, that's all you're thinking about. And, like, that's really nice sometimes.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, and I've even found that, I mean, I do woodworking as part of my day job, but it's nice to have projects where, you're not thinking about some text message beeping up at you, or email, or meeting request, or that you don't have 6,000 things going on in your head.
Yeah,
it is just that one thing. You're just kind of dialed in, and I think that can be rare for a lot of people these days, is to have the luxury to just think about one thing.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I wonder all the time. It sort of seems in some ways that woodworking and making is a more vibrant pastime now than maybe it was even when we were kids, and I wonder if how much of that is, like, people really do need a thing that is respite from all of the distraction that you get in a very complicated modern world. And, like, how much of it is because so much of what we do is abstract and digital and, mediated by a bunch of technology, where, like, just doing something with your hands fulfills a need that all of us have that, like, maybe we don't even know.
Yeah. Do you find that to be the case with people that you work with? Because you're obviously working with a lot of people that are very... the products that you create, you can never really hold.
Yeah, it is unusual how many software engineers have one of these pastimes in some form or another. And it's really funny. It's almost so if you tell someone that you're a woodworker, you show them a picture of a thing that you make, like one of your colleagues, they're like, "Oh my God, like, I didn't know, like, here, let me show you all of the things that I've made."
Yeah.
And so just the number of software engineers who spend all day long writing code, who go home to their shop at night and, like, try to make something out of wood or metal or whatever else, it's, like, really surprising, like, how many folks do that.
Today's episode is brought to you by Epilog Laser. Quickly and easily customize your woodworking projects for added beauty and value. Learn more at epiloglaser.com.
I think inherently, anybody, no matter what, for the most part, no matter what field of engineering they're in, they enjoy that level of precision, I think. Like they enjoy stuff to be very orderly, and building something by design for the most part is very orderly to get it to work. So it makes sense. And I think you're right. I think thinking about the engineers I know, whether they're software engineers or, civil engineers or whatever, they like stuff to be orderly and they enjoy doing something.
Yeah. And that is not the only way to approach the craft. Like there are people who make amazing things who have a very different process than I do.
Oh yes.
Yeah, like the thing that I do a lot of actually is like I build 3D models of things before I make them, and so like I know exactly how everything is going to come together. I know exactly the dimensions of things, and increasingly I use CNC machines to do bits and pieces of the work that I'm doing. And mostly that's just part of the way that I think about the world. Like I'm just sort of very comfortable being in that paradigm, and like part of it is just saving time. Like what I enjoy is like being able to finish a project. So like I get very agitated at myself if I start things and don't finish them in some reasonable amount of time. And so sometimes like I will just pick a tool where I know it's like, all right, like I've got 5 hours to work on this thing, and like I gotta choose the tool so I can get to the end state in the allotted amount of time. And that's a very different thing. Some people would like just find everything about what I just said barbaric.
Blasphemous.
It's blasphemous. It's like CNC, and like, you're putting time pressure on yourself. Like I want to relax. And so like I understand everybody's got a different process.
Yeah. So that leads me into a good question. Would you consider yourself, I mean, I think you've already kind of answered it, but would you consider yourself more of a traditional woodworker, or do you like to, I mean, you said you like to use CNCs. Do you blend hand tools in your work at all, or everything?
All of the above.
Okay.
And sometimes it depends on, what is it I'm trying to accomplish and what sort of mood am I in when I'm making something. And again, like I get to have moods because I'm a hobbyist. Like I would make very different decisions if I were like cranking out commissions or like doing something at a production shop.
Yep.
Like I know a cabinet maker here in the Bay Area who, I've just worked with for years and years and years, and like he uses more and more automation all the time. And like his thing is like, look, I've got a huge amount of demand for the work that I'm doing. Like I want to hold a high bar for craftsmanship and quality, but like I've got to use automation in order to just make this work. There's just no other economic way to run this business. Whereas like I can catch a mood and decide that it's Japanese pull saws and Lee Nielsen planes and and just relax in the process.
So would you oh, sorry, go ahead, Phil.
Well, I was going to say, it kind of reminds me yesterday, Logan, for you, where you were in the office here shooting a couple of photos and you had a little space in between some of the things, and it was like, what are you going to do? And you just grabbed a couple of pieces of white oak that you had and were turning small bowls and platters. And, the idea was using up the space, the time, but on the other hand, I think you were also working on like creating forms quickly.
Yes.
And, like building that skill of, like you can kind of wander around at the lathe and get something done.
Yeah.
But then there's also just that efficient use of tools.
Yeah.
I think the lathe is especially beautiful at that.
It is.
I mean, I remember my daughter, like I've got a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, and my daughter, they're both Harry Potter fans, and at one point they were like, they broke a Harry Potter wand that they had bought at Universal
No.
Studios or something. And they were like so despondent. And I went to the shop and like grabbed a walnut dowel, and in
Yep.
20 minutes I had like something that was better than the thing that they had bought at the store, and then they were very happy. And like that's a satisfying thing to be able to
Oh yeah.
just quickly get a useful form out of a tool and then give it to someone and make them happy.
Yep. So, Tevin, would you ever consider? So, I mean, you consider yourself a hobbyist. Would you ever want to do woodworking full time in a production scale, or is it like, nope, absolutely not? Like, I mean, obviously you have a career path that you're in. Could you see yourself in a parallel universe doing it at a production level, or is it more enjoyable as a hobby?
I look, there was a fork in the road for me when I was a teenager where I very well could have gone into the family business, and I think I would have been happy doing that. I mean, like I'm glad with the choices that I made, but like I think I would have been glad with those choices as well. The reason I didn't make them, for what it's worth, is my dad was pushing me super, super hard not to do that. And I've never, I never really understood that. Like, I don't think he appreciated how great the thing was that he did. Like he's passed away a while ago now. But I still drive around these parts of rural Central Virginia where I grew up, and like I can sort of point at like, hey, that's a church that my dad built, or like that's a building at the local university that my dad built, and like they're these, or that my granddad built, and these are, just have such an amazing big impact, like just the thousands and thousands of people over decades and decades who have found joy and utility in the things that they did. And like I think they were like, all right, well, you should go do something better. And I'm like, all right, that's a really weird way to frame things, because what you did was amazing. But he was very effective at convincing me not to do it. So I did construction work as a teenager with him, and he would give me the crappiest jobs. So it was, push wheelbarrows of mortar up a hill all day long to the bricklayers, or, let's have you carry bundles of shingles up onto hot roofs in July Virginia weather. Or here's a jackhammer, this concrete basement floor needs to be broken up.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So when was it that you first tried out a CNC? Was it something that you had avoided for a while, or was it exciting as a woodworking and technology marriage?
I avoided it for a really, really long time. I was one of the people that had the type of skepticism that like, this isn't real woodworking. Like this is, it's not the way my dad did it. It's not the way Norm did it. Like, I'm just not going to do this stuff. And so I waited a really long time. I didn't know whether I would enjoy the process of using it, because it was really different. Before I had a CNC machine, I didn't design things in 3D CAD, and like I just wanted to go to the shop and make things and not even necessarily have drawings for them. And it really, I found once I got over the hump that they're interesting machines to learn. So like it can be a lot of fun figuring out how to use them and use them effectively. I found it super enjoyable, and like the thing that it does for me now is it lets me do a bunch of things that would be very difficult or impossible without them. So it just, once you have facility with the tool, it opens up a whole new avenue of creativity that you didn't have before, because the machine can not just do things faster that you could do by hand, but it can do things that are impossible or impractical to do by hand. Whether it's a laser cutter or a CNC router, or, like pick your thing, like you can just do some pretty awesome stuff with these machines. And and I never use them to the exclusion of other things. So like we still have table saws and planers and joiners and all of the things that I've known and had forever. But like these are interesting new complements to what I've done for a really long time.
Yeah. So it sounds like we just have a few more minutes with you, Kevin. On that note, where do you think, I mean, obviously you being in the technology field, where do you think technology and woodworking are really going to kind of converge in the future? I mean, we've seen a big jump with CNCs. We saw a big jump with SawStop, a decade ago. Where do you think you see it going?
Yeah, I think the CNC software or the CNC machines will get cheaper and more accessible. I mean, just even over the past 5 years, like the number of people I know who have a CNC router and, have added that to their repertoire of woodworking tools has gotten a lot higher. So I think they'll get cheaper and they'll be less intimidating. I think one of the things that is likely to happen over the next 5 or 10 years is that you will start getting better software for doing design. And like for me,
sure.
that was a big barrier to entry. Like I waited forever and ever to start using 3D printers, mostly because I wasn't fluent with 3D CAD.
Yeah.
And like that was it was a pretty big barrier to entry. Like I use I know a ton of woodworkers use SketchUp. I use Fusion 360 from Autodesk.
Sure.
And the thing that I had to do there was I was going on vacation, and I was like, all right, like my project for this vacation is I'm going to sit down and watch a ton of YouTube videos about Fusion 360. I'm going to buy a license to this thing. I'm going to learn how to use this thing. Like at the end of the week, I'm going to have designed something useful. And once you get over the activation energy, it's like just super amazing to like have the new thing in your toolkit, but it's like a high barrier. And so I think the software is going to get better over the next handful of years. And I think maybe that's the biggest thing holding people. It's like the cost of the machine and like the difficulty of using the software.
Yeah, that's funny. So before we go, I have one more question that everybody wants to know. When's Windows XP coming back? Asking for the people.
That's a very, very fine question. One of the things that I did with Windows 11 is I was like, can you guys just please put a startup sound back into the operating system? Because like I still get nostalgia for the startup sound from Windows XP.
Yeah.
And hilarious. Like Windows XP was under development when I was an intern at Microsoft Research in 2001. So like
funny.
we were dog fooding XP while I was there with my PhD advisor. And so I have very, very fond memories of XP. And so they did in Windows 11, and it's like nobody turns their computer off anymore. But like if you reboot your computer, like there's a startup sound now to try to get me some of my Windows XP nostalgia back.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Well, thanks, Kevin, for joining us today on the podcast. If you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, you can share them on our YouTube channel where you can see the podcast, or you can send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. I want to do a shout out for today's free plan that goes with the episode. We're doing it's a quick and easy drill press table. I think that a drill press is one of those really important tools for woodworking. And as we've talked about already, you can use it for metalworking as well, and having a good fence and table that goes with it. So on our YouTube channel, as well as the show notes page for this episode, you'll be able to find plans for a really sweet drill press table setup. Otherwise, thank you again for joining us. And also thanks again to Epilogue Laser for sponsoring today's episode. Worked really well with the connection between woodworking and technology, and just all the ways that you can customize and personalize your projects with something like an Epilogue Laser. You want to check them out at epiloguelaser.com. Thanks, Kevin, and we'll see you next time on the ShopNotes Podcast. Bye, everybody.